Imagine it's a hot day, and you go to your favorite grocery store and get your favorite flavor of ice cream, strawberry. The ice cream tastes incredible as usual, and it's not until you look at the carton that you realize it's a little bit different. This ice cream was made without cows. But how could this be? How can we make ice cream without using cows? Luckily, the lid of the ice cream container has some answers. It tells you about the science, the industry, the government perspectives, and the societal implications of cow-free ice cream and all other cow-free dairy products. You decide to start by reading the science section. Now let's discuss the science of cow-free milk. Luckily, we have the help of the scientist Zsofia Mendly-Zambo, who will be walking us through her research and some of her experience in the field of cow-free milk. She currently works for the University of the Fraser Valley's Food and Agricultural Institute, or the FAI for short. Her project is called Dairy 2.0, exploring policy implications and public perceptions of cellular agriculture. Now let's hear from her.
My name is Zsofia Mendly-Zambo. I am currently a research assistant at the Food and Agriculture Institute at the University of the Fraser Valley. I'm actually also currently a PhD student at York University in Toronto.
Now that we have backup, let's explore the concepts and see if there are any places we need some help. There are a number of different words you've heard used to describe this project, from cellular milk to yeast-derived dairy to cow-free milk to transgenic yeast milk. But how does changing the way that we name this product change how the milk is perceived? Do these names lead you to perceive that the milk you're drinking here is the same composition as the milk you would buy regularly at a store? Or do these names lead you to perceive that the milk is completely different, or that it's a different product altogether? This is why the way that we name this product is so important. Now let's touch on an important topic: the difference between agriculture, which is the idea of using animals and occurs on farms, versus cellular agriculture, which is a process that produces animal products without the use of animals themselves. Now let's explore the process of creating cultured milk. We'll start by using a cow, and the cow only comes into the process in that we'll extract its genetic information in the form of DNA, or deoxyribose nucleic acid. We can then give this DNA blueprint into yeast, which means that they now have the instructions that are required to create these milk proteins. And that's how we're able to get milk that's the same composition as regular cow milk using yeast. We also use transgenic technologies when we're making human insulin to treat diabetes. So now that we know about how this cellular dairy is created, let's learn about what people's perceptions are of the product. Would you mind telling us a little bit about your research and what you've learned?
What we're doing at the Food and Agriculture Institute is we are interested in understanding the perceptions and acceptance from consumers in British Columbia. So we are particularly interested in the food-interested public and vegans. And we also did interviews with farmers and other potentially impacted stakeholders to sort of have an understanding of how this technology will impact them and how they felt about it. So this is definitely very much an ongoing project, but we should have some results coming out soon.
This leads us to our first major question. What possible motivations are driving the science behind cellular agriculture? Now let's talk about the government involvement in cow-free milk. There are two main ways that the government can be involved in promoting cow-free milk. The first is through policy, which decides how the research will be used. The second is through proactive support of farmers as well as research. Let's go back and talk to Zsofia. Maybe she has any insights into how government is involved in cow-free milk.
I cannot identify any specific policies at this point in time. I think that policy is very important and that governments take a proactive approach to this new technology. But that said, I don't see this technology coming in and being as disruptive as some might think. I think that the adoption of cultured dairy will be actually a bit slow, especially as consumers start to understand what it is or warm up to it. But I think that in general, being proactive is best. So that means doing research, partnering with institutes such as the Food and Agriculture Institute that does research, and really taking a look at the intended and unintended consequences of whatever policy decisions is actually not that new, because something I don't think I mentioned before is that this technology has already been very well established, food safe. That's how we get a stable supply of both insulin and rennet. So there won't be too many barriers in terms of this food arriving, but I do think that the government can really get on board and start talking to people and implementing really good policy that helps everybody.
This leads us to our next question. How should governments assess the potential risks and benefits of cellular agriculture? Now let's explore how society and cow-free milk interact. You, along with the rest of society, might have a lot of questions about cow-free milk. How is the eating experience? Is it a real milk or an alternative milk like almond milk? Will there be a slow adoption? How expensive will it be? And is it a genetically modified organism? Now let's touch on the environmental impact of cow-free milk. Is it better for the environment? Some say that it might help in that it has less intensive farming techniques, and the process generally uses less water than having regular cow milk. However, it's also important to note that cow-free milk requires other resources such as sugar, which would require other manufacturers and suppliers. However, it's also important to note that not all farming practices are less good for the environment. There are some environmentally friendly farming techniques, so it's really a balance between these different factors. Now let's touch on what I think might be a burning question. Is cellular dairy a genetically modified product?
Cellular dairy isn't GMO itself. It's made using an organism that has been genetically modified, and that is a gene has been inserted to it. But the material itself is not GMO.
That leads us to question 3. How might society react to changes in the way that food is produced? Before we move on to our next section, let's look into how Zsofia ended up studying perceptions of scientific technologies. Would you mind telling us a little bit about your background and how you got into this industry in the first place?
A little backstory about me. I went to university at McGill in nutritional biochemistry, and I actually wanted to do herbology, and my mom said, there's no way you're getting an education unless it's through university. So I was like, okay, fine. And then I went, and it was wonderful, but it was very hard. So like a lot of undergraduates, you get through it. But then I learned to really love school, and especially science. So I continued on, and I did a master's.
That's amazing. Let's break down the rest of her career timeline. After completing her undergraduate degree in nutrition and biochemistry at McGill University, she then moved on to be a master's student studying immunology of human nutrition. Later, she transitioned from working in the sciences to working in more of the social sciences, and that's what she was able to integrate with her project on Dairy 2.0. She's also working on her PhD currently at York University. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got started working on this specific Dairy 2.0 project?
The Genome BC project and the project on cellular dairy was just one of the projects that, that's a project I got taken on to do. And it's been really great to sort of marry my background in science with also my education in the social sciences, because I find that they really complement each other well when you're especially looking at how something like a scientific technology can be applied to the larger policy or social environment.
Our last topic explores the industry of cow-free milk. Like we touched on earlier, there's already companies producing cow-free milk, and this is largely because it is a well-established piece of technology, with transgenic technology being used for a number of different purposes. It's also a non-genetically modified product, despite being from organisms that were genetically modified itself. However, a lot of consumers may still perceive it as such. This means that though there are already cow-free dairy products being produced, consumers might not be willing to try them. How can existing industries adapt to interact with this new cellular dairy product?
So one example I was thinking about could be you have a brewery who's already equipped to, or other facilities that are equipped to produce yeast-derived dairy proteins, so the casein and whey. They can produce it and then send those proteins and other material to the farmers, who then can perhaps make cheese or other value-added products using the terroir of their farm, of their region. And so you could have some really interesting foods come out that way. Another thing that could be really interesting, and something that I think would have a sort of higher barrier to actually being produced, though, is breast milk. So in Canada, we have a breast milk bank, but it falls prey to shortages. So you could provide a stable, or biotech companies particularly, could work on making a stable supply of breast milk. And this breast milk is very important, especially for preterm babies.
This leads us into our final question. How might other industries be impacted by replacing traditional agriculture with cellular technology? Now that we have all of these different questions, I would like you to think about them. How would you answer them? And I would also like for you to think about if you would try cellular dairy products in the future. Thank you for watching this Genomics and Society video by Genome BC. If you would like to see more Gene School content, go to genomebc.ca/education.